The stadium hadn't gone quiet yet. 10,000 people were still on their feet, Philippine flags still cutting through the Roman air, the chants still rolling through the marble stands of the Foro Italico like waves that refused to settle. Eala had just done something nobody in that building truly believed was coming. She had just beaten the best tennis player on the planet. But the victory itself wasn't what left the crowd frozen. It wasn't the scoreline. It wasn't the tears. It was what she did next. She reached into her bag, pulled something out, and walked back toward the net, toward the woman she had just defeated. And the moment that followed would be replayed 60 million times before the night was over. But to understand why that moment hit the way it did, you have to go back to where this week actually started. Because nothing about Eala's Italian Open was supposed to look like this. Rome in May carries a particular kind of weight in the tennis world. The clay at the Foro Italico is slower, heavier, and more punishing than almost anywhere else on tour. It rewards patience, physical endurance, and the kind of tactical intelligence that usually comes with years of experience on the surface. It is not, historically, the place where 20-year-olds announce themselves to the world. And yet, walking into the draw that week, Eala had already done something quietly remarkable before a single ball was struck in her semifinal. She had survived a rain-soaked 3-set war against Magdalena Frech, the kind of match that breaks momentum before it even builds. She had gone back and avenged a previous loss by eliminating the 31st seed in straight sets. She had pushed world number 2 Elena Rybakina to the absolute limit at her previous tournament before falling in a tight third set. The pattern was clear to anyone paying attention. Eala wasn't just competing anymore. She was accumulating evidence. Every match was adding another line to a case she was quietly building, that she belonged at this level, that the clay wasn't her weakness, and that the names across the net were no longer bigger than she was. Still, her ranking sat at 38th in the world when she walked out for that semifinal, and waiting on the other side of the net was Aryna Sabalenka. There is a version of Aryna Sabalenka that exists on paper, the numbers, the titles, the rankings, and then there is the version that shows up on a tennis court, and the two are not always easy to reconcile until you watch her play. The world number 1 had already completed the Sunshine Double earlier in the season, winning both Indian Wells and Miami back-to-back. She had claimed 3 Madrid Open titles. She had not dropped a set to a player outside the top 20 during the entire clay season leading into Rome. Her first serve, when it was working, was essentially unreturnable for most of the players on tour. Her forehand, when she found her range, was a weapon that could end rallies before they began. And her mental game, the roaring celebrations after big points, the way she fed crowd energy, had a way of making opponents feel like they were competing against the building itself, not just the person on the other side of the court. Analysts called it a routine win waiting to happen. Bookmakers made her the overwhelming favorite. The general consensus, spoken or not, was that Eala had done brilliantly just to make it this far, and that Sabalenka would restore the expected order quickly and efficiently. Nobody told Eala any of that, or if they did, she had already decided not to listen. The opening games arrived with the kind of careful, probing quality that high-stakes matches often begin with. Both players finding their range, neither willing to hand anything over early. And then, without warning, Eala broke Sabalenka's serve. The Foro Italico stirred. The Philippine flags, which had been waving steadily through the stands, began to move faster. Eala broke again. She raced out to a 5-2 lead, her ground strokes landing deep in the corners with a precision that caught even Sabalenka off guard. This was not the Eala who had struggled on clay in the weeks before. Her movement looked sharp and controlled. Her decision-making under pressure was clean. She was not surviving the rallies, she was dictating them, stepping into the court, taking time from the world number 1, making Sabalenka feel rushed in a way she rarely experienced. But champions don't fold at 5-2. That's what separates them from everyone else. Sabalenka steadied herself, broke back, and pushed the set to 5-4. For a brief, electric moment, the momentum tilted. The crowd felt it. The flag slowed slightly. The noise shifted from celebration towards something closer to nervous tension. And that's when Eala chose to close the door.
She held her nerve under the full weight of everything that serving out a set against the world #1 means, and she took it. 6-4. The central stadium came apart at the seams.
The second set was never supposed to be competitive. That was the conventional wisdom, and for exactly one game, it appeared to be correct. Sabalenka came out of the interval with everything dialed up. She broke Eala's serve in the very first game of the second set, roaring into the Roman afternoon air, her voice carrying across the entire arena. For a brief moment, it looked like the natural order had been restored. The world #1 was back. The gap between them was reasserting itself. The first set had been extraordinary, but this was where experience and power were going to matter most. Eala did not panic. She did not retreat to the baseline and start defending. She broke back immediately. 1-1. And what followed was something that turned the Foro Italico into a pressure cooker for every single person inside it. 6 consecutive service holds, neither player giving away a single game, every point feeling heavier than the last, the crowd barely able to breathe between rallies. The tension inside that stadium became suffocating in the best possible way. Philippine flags moved in synchronized waves as if thousands of hands were trying to collectively will something historic into existence. At 5-4, Eala walked to the baseline to serve for the match. Her hands were steady. Her eyes were focused. She had rehearsed this moment in her mind long before it ever existed in reality. Not specifically against Sabalenka, but in the private mental repetitions that athletes go through when they are preparing not just for a match, but for the version of themselves they want to become. She was ready. She had always been ready. She just needed the moment to arrive. The first serve exploded into the corner. Sabalenka's return floated long. 15-love. The crowd exhaled, and then immediately tensed again. The second serve came in even bolder, an ace down the tee that Sabalenka could only watch. 30-love. The stadium erupted. Flags surged higher. The chant for Eala rolled through the marble stands like thunder breaking across a mountain range. But Sabalenka is not the world #1 for nothing. She dug in with the kind of focus that only comes from having been in these moments dozens of times before. She won the next 2 points, 30-30. 1 point from deuce, 1 point from dragging the match back from the edge and forcing Eala to do this all over again. Eala bounced the ball once, twice, 3 times at the baseline. She glanced toward the stands. Her mother, Riza, was there, tears already streaming down her face before a single point had been decided. She looked briefly toward the royal box, where Italian dignitaries leaned forward in their seats. And then she turned back to the baseline, because that was the only place that mattered now. She served. The ball came back into play. Sabalenka scrambled to stay in the point, but could only deflect it weakly into the net. 40-30. Match point. The Foro Italico held its breath. Sabalenka walked slowly to the baseline to receive. Her expression was unreadable. Not anger, not panic, not despair. Pure focus. Champions don't believe they're finished even when the scoreboard is telling them otherwise. She had saved match points before. She had clawed back from the edge in matches that looked gone. She was not done yet. Eala tossed the ball. She swung. The serve landed wide, not an ace, but enough to keep the rally alive. Sabalenka's return floated back into the middle of the court, sitting up, inviting. Eala stepped forward without hesitation. She loaded up the forehand. She swung through it completely and drilled it into the open court. Sabalenka didn't even chase it. The ball was already past her before her first step landed. Game, set, match. Alex Eala. The racket hit the clay. Eala covered her face with both hands. Her shoulders shook. Everything she had carried through the season, the early exits, the ranking sliding from 29th down to 45th, the losses that came with questions she couldn't always answer publicly, broke through all at once in tears she had been holding back for months. The Foro Italico responded with the kind of noise that doesn't just fill a stadium, it fills the space between your ribs. Across the court, Sabalenka walked toward the net.
She had just lost a match she was expected to dominate. Her title defense in Rome was over. The clay season she had controlled so completely now had a crack running through it that nobody had seen coming. And yet her expression as she crossed the court toward the woman who had just beaten her was not bitterness, it was not frustration. It was something quieter and more genuine than either of those things. Respect in its purest form just shows up.
"You played well," Sabalenka said quietly when they met at the net. "You deserve this." Eala, still tearful, managed to whisper back, "Thank you." What happened next was not the quick, functional handshake that most post-match meetings at the net tend to be, the kind that lasts exactly long enough for the cameras to capture it before both players move on. This was a genuine embrace, the kind that lingers just long enough to say everything that words can't, the kind that gets remembered long after the crowd has gone home and the stadium lights have dimmed. "Go win the final," Sabalenka added quietly before they separated. "You're ready." 3 words that carried more weight than any ranking or seeding or bookmaker's odds ever could. The match was over. The crowd was still buzzing with that restless post-victory energy, the kind where nobody quite wants to leave because they sense something rare just happened and they don't want to lose it by walking out into the ordinary world too quickly. Sabalenka had already turned to walk off the court, and then Eala called out to her. The world number 1 stopped. She turned around, confused. The crowd, still caught in its own celebration, slowly fell quiet as something in the atmosphere shifted. Cameras tightened their angles. Something unusual was unfolding. Eala stepped forward. In her hands was a small plaque, the symbolic award given to the semifinal winner, the tangible representation of a place in the final. She held it out towards Sabalenka, not as a joke, not as a gesture of pity, as something she genuinely meant. "I want you to have this," she said. Sabalenka froze. "What? No," she replied immediately. "You earned it. You won." Eala shook her head. "I know I won, but this match meant more than a trophy to me. It meant proving I belong at this level, and I couldn't have done that without you. You've been the standard for so long, the player everyone measures themselves against, the one who makes everyone better. I want you to have this as a reminder that even champions create the next generation." A pause settled over the entire stadium, the kind of silence that only arrives when something genuinely unexpected has been said out loud in a public space. For the first time all match, through the pressure of the first set, through the war of attrition in the second, through the match point and the final forehand, Sabalenka's composure cracked. The world number 1, who had just watched her title defense end in a loss she hadn't anticipated, stood completely still as her eyes filled. "You're something special," she said softly, accepting the plaque with both hands. "You know that." She stepped forward and pulled Eala into another embrace. This one lasted longer than the first. There was no urgency in it, no tension, no cameras being played to. Just 2 athletes, one who had just won and one who had just lost, sharing a moment that had nothing to do with competition and everything to do with what sport is actually for at its best. The crowd, which had been celebrating Eala's victory seconds earlier, erupted for something completely different. Not for a winner, not for a score, for what it looks like when 2 people at the highest level of their profession treat each other with genuine grace. The footage spread faster than almost any match highlight in recent tennis memory. Within hours, the clip had been viewed over 60 million times across social media platforms. The comments section transformed into something rarely seen online, a space where cynicism and snark were almost entirely absent, replaced by something that looked a lot like collective emotion.
"I've never seen anything like this. The winner giving her trophy away. That's not sportsmanship, that's humanity," one comment read, pulling in hundreds of thousands of likes before the night was done. Sabalenka crying, Eala crying, everyone crying. I'm crying too. This is why tennis matters, not just the rivalry, but the respect. Philippine media covered the moment with the kind of energy reserved for once-in-a-generation stories. Alex Eala, champion on the court, champion in the heart, one headline declared. The gesture that won Rome, said another. Even Belarusian outlets acknowledged what had happened, with one article leading simply with, Sabalenka loses but gains a friend. The Filipina star's grace moves the world. That evening, Sabalenka posted about the moment on Instagram. She shared a photograph of herself holding the plaque, her eyes still visibly red from emotion, with a caption that read, "I came to Rome to win the title. I leave with..." I've never seen anything like this, the winner giving her trophy away. That's not sportsmanship, that's humanity. One comment read, pulling in hundreds of thousands of likes before the night was done. Sabalenka crying, Allah crying, everyone crying. I'm crying too. This is why tennis matters, not just the rivalry, but the respect. Philippine media covered the moment with the kind of energy reserved for once-in-a-generation stories. Alex Eala, champion on the court, champion in the heart, one headline declared. The gesture that won Rome, said another. Even Belarusian outlets acknowledged what had happened, with one article leading simply with, Sabalenka loses but gains a friend. The Filipina star's grace moves the world. That evening, Sabalenka posted about the moment on Instagram. She shared a photograph of herself holding the plaque, her eyes still visibly red from emotion, with a caption that read, I came to Rome to win the title. I leave with something I never expected, a friend. Thank you, Alex. You are a champion in every sense of the word. Now go win the final. Eala replied within minutes, Thank you for being the standard, for making all of us better. I'll do my best. The exchange was liked over 10 million times, and somewhere between those two messages, the story of the Italian Open shifted. It was no longer just about a tennis result. It was about what these two players, at this specific moment, chose to be for each other. 2 days later, the Italian Open final arrived. Eala's opponent was Coco Gauff, world number 3, a former champion in Rome, and one of Eala's closest friends on the tour. It was the kind of final that the sport occasionally produces to remind everyone why they fell in love with the sport in the first place. Two young players, two rising forces, two genuine competitors who genuinely cared about each other off the court, now standing on opposite sides of the net with a title between them. Oddsmakers slightly favored Gauff. She had been to this stage before. She knew the weight of a WTA 1000 final, knew how to manage the nerves and the expectations, and the specific pressure of playing for a major title. Eala, by contrast, was standing in her first WTA 1000 championship match. For most players at 20 years old, that fact alone would have been paralyzing. But Eala was no longer the same player who had arrived in Rome with questions about her clay court ability. Something had shifted over the course of the week, not just tactically or physically, but in the way she carried herself on the court. She moved like she belonged there. She played like she had already decided how the story ended. The first set was razor close. Both players held serve through the opening 6 games, neither one willing to concede even a fragment of momentum. At 4-all, Eala earned her first break point of the match and converted it with a blistering forehand winner that left Gauff completely stranded at the baseline. One of the broadcasters watching the shot land said quietly into his microphone, I've been following Alex Eala for years. I have never seen her this confident. This is not the same player who lost in Linz. This is someone completely transformed. She served out the set, 6-4. The Foro Italico erupted for the 3rd time in 2 days. The second set followed a similar rhythm. Gauff fought back hard. She always does, because that's the competitor she is, digging through extended rallies and refusing to let the final slip away without demanding every single point. But Eala's timing, her belief, her composure under pressure had reached a level that week that made every shot feel intentional rather than improvised. She wasn't surviving the big moments, she was inhabiting them. Eala broke early in the second set, surged to a 4-1 lead and never looked back. When the final point ended, the scoreboard read 6-4, 6-3. Eala was the Italian Open champion.
She dropped to her knees on the clay. Her face disappeared into her hands. Her shoulders shook with tears that had been building for years, through the doubts, the setbacks, the matches that slipped away, the moments where the gap between where she was and where she wanted to be had felt enormous and possibly permanent. Her mother, Riza, came running from the stands and wrapped her arms around her daughter before the tears had even slowed. Her coaches joined them at courtside. The celebration spilled across the clay in a wave of pure, unscripted joy. Around the stadium, Philippine flags waved in every section. The chants rolled through the marble statues of. She dropped to her knees on the clay. Her face disappeared into her hands. Her shoulders shook with tears that had been building for years, through the doubts, the setbacks, the matches that slipped away, the moments where the gap between where she was and where she wanted to be had felt enormous and possibly permanent. Her mother, Riza, came running from the stands and wrapped her arms around her daughter before the tears had even slowed. Her coaches joined them at courtside. The celebration spilled across the clay in a wave of pure, unscripted joy. Around the stadium, Philippine flags waved in every section. The chants rolled through the marble statues of the Foro Italico as if the building itself was refusing to let the moment fade. Eala lifted the trophy above her head, tears still streaming, and stood there as history quietly settled around her. She was 20 years old. She was the Italian Open champion, and she had gotten there by defeating the world #1, then giving away the plaque that proved it, and then going out 2 days later and winning the whole thing anyway. In the stands, as Eala held the trophy toward the sky, something happened that the broadcast cameras almost missed. Aryna Sabalenka was still there. The world #1 had stayed in Rome after her semifinal loss, not to disappear, not to slip away quietly before the cameras could find her, but to watch, to witness, to be present for something she recognized as genuinely important. When Eala spotted her in the crowd, she lifted the trophy in her direction, a quiet salute, one champion to another, across the distance between the court and the stands. Sabalenka rose to her feet and applauded. Not politely, not briefly. She stood and she clapped, and the people around her turned to look at the world #1 showing up in the stands for the woman who had beaten her, and the moment spread across social media within the hour. She stayed, she watched, she clapped, one fan wrote. That's not rivalry, that's respect. And it was, entirely. Eala didn't just win a tennis tournament in Rome, she won it in a way that made people care about what had happened beyond the scorecard, beyond the ranking points, beyond the prize money and the implications for the rest of the season. She won it by beating the best player in the world and then immediately doing something generous with the proof. She won it by showing up in a final against her closest friend and competing with everything she had. She won it by carrying herself through every moment of a remarkable week like someone who had already decided who she wanted to be, not just as a tennis player, but as a person. There's a question worth sitting with, though. When Eala looks back on this week years from now, when the clay has been swept from the courts and the flags have come down and the noise of the Foro Italico has long since faded into memory, will she remember the trophy she won, or will she remember the one she gave away? Both matter, but something tells you she already knows which one meant more. Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if this kind of story is what you're here for, the moments in sport that go beyond the scoreline and say something true about the people playing, then you know what to do.